Hi guys, tonight we're tackling one of the deepest questions in physics and philosophy. What if time itself is just an illusion? What if past, present and future all exist simultaneously, and our experience of time flowing is nothing more than a trick of human consciousness? If you enjoy these reality-questioning sleep stories that challenge our most basic assumptions about existence, hit that like button and subscribe for more. And drop a comment letting me know what time it is where you are and where you're listening from. It's great hearing from listeners across the planet. Alright, let's begin. Picture yourself standing in your kitchen this morning, watching steam rise from your coffee cup, while the second hand of the wall clock ticks steadily forward. You experience this moment as fleeting, already becoming memory as you read these words. But what if everything you believe about this experience is fundamentally wrong? What if the very concept of time flowing from past to future is nothing more than a persistent illusion created by the limitations of human consciousness? The implications would be staggering. Every assumption about causality, every understanding of progress and decay, every belief about birth and death would crumble. We would be forced to confront the possibility that all moments exist simultaneously in what physicists call the block universe, where your morning coffee exists alongside your last breath, where the birth of stars occurs simultaneously with their death, and where the entire history of the cosmos unfolds in an eternal, unchanging present. This isn't merely philosophical speculation. Leading physicists have presented compelling evidence that time as we experience it may indeed be an illusion. Albert Einstein himself declared that the distinction between past, present and future is nothing more than a stubbornly persistent illusion. When Einstein's close friend Michel Besso died in 1955, Einstein wrote to his family, stating that for those who believe in physics, the distinction between past, present and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. This wasn't empty consolation, but a profound statement about the nature of reality itself. Consider the revolutionary implications emerging from modern physics. In Einstein's theory of relativity, simultaneity is relative. Two events that appear simultaneous to one observer may occur at different times for another observer moving at high velocity. At the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva, particles accelerated to 99.9999%. The speed of light experienced time dilation so extreme that their internal clocks effectively stop relative to stationary observers. A muon particle that would normally decay in 2.2 microseconds can persist for over 22 microseconds when travelling at these velocities. This isn't just theoretical mathematics, but measurable reality affecting subatomic particles, accelerated in a 27-kilometre underground tunnel. The Global Positioning System satellites orbiting Earth at an altitude of 20,000 kilometres must account for both special and general relativistic effects. Without these corrections, GPS would accumulate errors of approximately 10 kilometres per day. The satellite's atomic clocks run approximately 38 microseconds per day faster than identical clocks on Earth's surface due to weaker gravitational fields and their orbital velocity of 14,000 kilometers per hour. These aren't abstract concepts, but practical necessities for the technology that guides millions of drivers daily. But the truly mind-bending implications emerge when we consider quantum mechanics. In laboratory experiments conducted at universities worldwide, particles demonstrate the ability to seemingly communicate instantaneously across vast distances through quantum entanglement. When two particles become entangled, measuring one particle's properties instantly affects its partner, regardless of the spatial separation between them. Recent experiments have demonstrated this phenomenon over distances exceeding 1,200 kilometers between ground stations and satellites. Dr. Anton Zeilinger's team at the University of Vienna has demonstrated quantum teleportation of photons across the Danube River and later across distances of 143 kilometers between the Canary Islands. These experiments suggest that quantum information transcends the traditional constraints of space-time, operating in a realm where our conventional understanding of temporal sequence becomes meaningless. The mathematics of quantum mechanics presents an even more radical challenge to our intuitive understanding of time. The Schrödinger equation that governs quantum systems is time reversible, meaning the mathematical descriptions work equally well whether time flows forward or backward. This mathematical symmetry suggests that the arrow of time we experience may be emergent rather than fundamental. Professor Carlo Rovelli of the French National Centre for Scientific Research argues that time emerges from the quantum properties of matter and energy rather than existing as a fundamental dimension of reality. His calculations suggest that at the smaller scales, approximately the Planck length of 1.6 times 10 to the negative 35 meters, space-time itself becomes granular and discrete. At these scales, lasting approximately 5.4 times 10 to the negative 44 seconds, the very concept of temporal duration loses meaning. The thermodynamic arrow of time provides another crucial piece of this puzzle. The second law of thermodynamics states that entropy, or disorder, always increases in isolated systems. This principle explains why we remember the past but not the future, why eggs break but don't spontaneously reassemble, why heat flows from hot to cold objects. Yet this arrow emerges from statistical mechanics rather than being built into the fundamental laws of physics. Consider a simple example that illustrates this principle. If you were to film a glass shattering and play the footage in reverse, you would immediately recognize the reversal because glasses don't spontaneously reassemble from fragments. However, if you filmed two billiard balls colliding and played that footage in reverse, the reversed motion would appear perfectly natural. The fundamental laws governing the collision are time-symmetric, but our macroscopic experience is dominated by statistical effects involving trillions of particles. The implications extend beyond physics into neuroscience and consciousness studies. Recent research using functional magnetic resonance imaging reveals that the brain's perception of temporal order can be manipulated through transcranial magnetic stimulation. Dr. Agira Vateakis at the Cognitive Systems Research Institute has demonstrated that subjects can be made to perceive events in reverse temporal order when specific brain regions are stimulated with magnetic fields of approximately 1.5 Tesla. The brain constructs our experience of time through complex neural networks involving the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which regulates circadian rhythms, and the cerebellum, which processes temporal sequences. These structures evolved to help organisms survive in environments where cause preceded effect, and where anticipating future events provided survival advantages. But evolution optimized these systems for practical survival, not for perceiving ultimate reality. Studies of patients with specific brain lesions reveal how fragile our temporal experience truly is. Patients with damage to the posterior parietal cortex can lose the ability to sequence events properly, experiencing a condition called simultaneognosia, where all visual elements appear simultaneously without temporal order. Dr. Lynn Robertson's research at the University of California, Berkeley, demonstrates that these patients can see individual objects clearly, but cannot perceive the temporal relationships between them. The pharmaceutical industry has documented numerous substances that alter temporal perception. Psilocybin, the active compound in certain mushrooms, affects serotonin receptors in ways that can make minutes feel like hours or compress hours into apparent seconds. Research conducted at Imperial College London using doses of 25 milligrams of psilocybin shows consistent alterations in subjects' ability to estimate time intervals, with some subjects estimating that sessions lasting 6 hours had lasted only minutes. These neurological and pharmacological findings suggest that temporal experience is constructed by specific neural mechanisms, rather than being a direct perception of external reality. If time were fundamental to the universe's structure, it would be difficult to explain why localized brain alterations can so dramatically change temporal perception. The philosophical implications ripple outward into every aspect of human existence. If time is indeed an illusion, then the entire narrative structure of human life becomes suspect. The concept of progress, whether personal, technological, or moral, assumes that some states are temporally prior to others, and that change represents movement from past configurations to future ones. But in a timeless reality, all configurations exist simultaneously. Consider the implications for human mortality. In a block universe where all moments exist eternally, death becomes not the termination of existence, but simply the boundary of a four-dimensional structure. Your first breath exists simultaneously with your last, neither more or less real than the other. The grief we experience over lost loved ones reflects our limited perspective within space-time rather than their actual disappearance from reality. This perspective transforms our understanding of historical events. The construction of the Great Wall of China, which required the labour of over 1 million workers across more than 2,000 years, exists simultaneously with its current state as a tourist destination, receiving over 10 million visitors annually. The suffering and triumph involved in its construction aren't past events, but permanent features of the four-dimensional structure of reality. The economic implications alone would revolutionize human civilization. The entire concept of investment depends on the assumption that present actions can influence future outcomes. Global financial markets worth approximately $95 trillion operate on the principle that time flows from present to future, and that careful analysis can predict temporal developments. Stock markets in New York, London, Tokyo, and Hong Kong trade on the assumption that company earnings reports describe past performance and predict future potential. If time is illusory, then the 7.9 billion people currently alive exist simultaneously with all humans who have ever lived and all who ever will live. The current global population represents only a tiny fraction of the estimated 117 billion humans who have existed throughout history. In a timeless reality, cities like Lagos, with its projected population of 24.4 million by 2050, exist simultaneously with empty plains where those cities will stand. The environmental crisis takes on new dimensions when viewed through this lens. Climate scientists project that atmospheric carbon dioxide levels, currently at 420 parts per million, will reach 550 parts per million by 2100 without dramatic intervention. Global temperatures have already risen 1.1 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, with projections suggesting increases of up to 4 degrees Celsius by century's end. These changes affect ecosystems containing an estimated 8.7 million species, with current extinction rates estimated at 100 to 1,000 times the natural background rate. But if time is illusory, then the pristine Earth of millennia past exists simultaneously with these projected future conditions. The vast herds of American bison, numbering 60 million before European colonization, exist alongside the mere 30,000 that survive today. The 400 billion passenger pigeons that once darkened North American skies exist simultaneously with the empty forests of today and the potential restoration projects of tomorrow. Modern cosmology provides perhaps the most striking support for time's illusory nature. The universe appears to be 13.8 billion years old, based on observations of cosmic microwave background radiation. But this age assumes time flows uniformly throughout space. Einstein's general relativity demonstrates that gravitational fields affect the flow of time, meaning time has passed differently in various regions of the universe. Near the supermassive black hole at the centre of our galaxy, Sagittarius A star, with a mass 4.1 million times greater than the Sun, time dilation effects become extreme. The Event Horizon Telescope, a global network of radio telescopes spanning locations from Chile to Greenland, has captured images showing matter spiralling into this gravitational well at velocities approaching the speed of light. At the black hole's event horizon, time dilation becomes infinite relative to distant observers. The Milky Way galaxy contains an estimated 400 billion stars, many harbouring planetary systems where time flows at rates different from Earth's. The Kepler Space Telescope has identified over 4,000 confirmed exoplanets, with statistical analysis suggesting that every star hosts an average of 1.6 planets. On planets orbiting close to their stars, tidal forces create time dilation effect where one side experiences time differently than the other. Quantum field theory adds another layer of complexity. The vacuum of space isn't empty, but filled with quantum fields that fluctuate even at absolute zero temperature. These quantum fluctuations create virtual particles that pop into existence and annihilate within timescales shorter than Planck time. The Casimir effect, measurable in laboratory experiments, demonstrates that these quantum fluctuations exert real physical forces on metallic plates, separated by distances smaller than 1 micrometer. Dr. Stephen Hawking's work on black hole thermodynamics revealed that black holes emit radiation through quantum effects near their event horizons. This Hawking radiation suggests that black holes eventually evaporate completely, with evaporation times proportional to the cube of their mass. A black hole with the mass of the Sun would require 10 to the 67 years to evaporate completely, a time span incomprehensibly longer than the current age of the universe. Yet even these vast timescales may be meaningless if time itself is emergent rather than fundamental. The holographic principle, supported by string theory calculations, suggests that all information contained within a volume of space can be encoded on its boundary surface. This principle implies that three-dimensional reality might be a projection from information encoded on a two-dimensional surface, similar to how a hologram creates three-dimensional images from two-dimensional films. If reality is indeed holographic, then temporal experience might be analogous to playing a movie from a DVD. The entire movie exists simultaneously on the disc, but the player reveals it frame by frame, creating the illusion of temporal flow. Consciousness might function like the DVD player, sampling different portions of an eternal, timeless reality and constructing the experience of temporal flow. Recent developments in artificial intelligence provide intriguing parallels to these concepts. Large language models like GPT-4, trained on datasets containing over 1 trillion words, process information in ways that don't mirror human temporal experience. These systems can simultaneously consider multiple temporal contexts, analyzing past events, present conditions, and future possibilities without experiencing the sequential flow that characterizes human consciousness. The implications for artificial consciousness become profound if time is illusory. As computing systems become more sophisticated, approaching the processing power of human brains estimated at 10 to the 16th operations per second, they might develop forms of consciousness that don't rely on temporal sequence. Such artificial minds might perceive reality more directly, without the temporal illusion that constrains human experience. Consider the technological infrastructure supporting modern civilization. The internet consists of over 4.6 billion active users connected through approximately 1 billion websites, hosted on servers consuming about 200 billion kilowatt-hours of electricity annually. Data travels through fiber optic cables, totaling over 1 billion kilometers worldwide at speeds approaching the speed of light. Yet if time is illusory, All information transmitted through these networks exists simultaneously, rather than flowing from sender to receiver. These social implications extend into every human institution. Legal systems worldwide operate on principles of temporal causality, assuming that crimes precede punishments and that contracts create future obligations. The United Nations, representing 193 member nations, with a combined population of 7.9 billion people, operates on the assumption that international agreements create future compliance obligations. Religious and spiritual traditions would require fundamental re-examination. Christianity's emphasis on salvation history, Islam's focus on divine revelation through time, and Buddhism's concept of reincarnation across multiple lifetimes all assume temporal progression. If time is illusory, these traditions would need to develop new frameworks for understanding spiritual development and divine relationship. The concept of free will becomes particularly complex in a timeless reality. Traditional debates about determinism versus free will assume that choices made in the present influence future outcomes. But if all moments exist simultaneously, then the choices we experience ourselves making are permanent features of the four-dimensional structure, rather than dynamic decisions that shape unfolding reality. Neuroscientist Benjamin Libet's famous experiments in the 1980s demonstrated that measurable brain activity precedes conscious awareness of decision-making by approximately 350 milliseconds. Subsequent experiments using functional magnetic resonance imaging have extended this time gap to as much as 7 to 10 seconds for certain types of decisions. These findings suggest that conscious experience of choice may be constructed after neural processes have already determined outcomes. Educational systems worldwide would require transformation. Currently, over 1.5 billion students attend schools based on the assumption that learning represents temporal progression from ignorance to knowledge. If time is illusory, then students simultaneously exist in states of ignorance and understanding, with education serving to help consciousness access different aspects of eternal reality rather than acquiring new information sequentially. The entertainment industry, worth over $2 trillion globally, creates narratives based on temporal progression. Movies, television shows, books, and video games all rely on sequential story structures where events unfold from beginning to end. In a timeless reality, these narratives might represent ways of exploring different aspects of eternal relationships between characters rather than temporal developments. Sports and competition would take on new meanings. The Olympics, featuring over 11,000 athletes competing in 339 events, watched by over 4 billion viewers, celebrate human achievement through temporal comparison. Records represent improvements over time, with current performances compared to historical achievements. If time is illusory, then all athletic performances exist simultaneously, with current record holders existing alongside future athletes who will surpass them. Scientific research itself operates on temporal assumptions. The scientific method assumes that hypotheses can be tested through experiments that reveal information not previously known. Research and development spending worldwide exceeds $2 trillion annually based on the assumption that present investment can produce future discoveries. Over 8 million scientific researchers work in laboratories, expecting that their work will advance human knowledge through time. The peer review process, involving over 70 million published research papers, assumes that new findings represent temporal advances over previous understanding. Citation networks, where papers reference previous work over 14 million times annually, create knowledge structures based on temporal precedents. If time is illusory, then all scientific knowledge exists simultaneously, with research serving to help human consciousness access different aspects of eternal truth. Medical practice would require complete reconceptualization. Healthcare systems serving 7.9 billion people operate on the assumption that treatments applied in the present can influence future health outcomes. Preventive medicine assumes that current interventions can prevent future diseases. The global pharmaceutical industry, worth over $1.4 trillion annually, develops medicines based on temporal assumptions about how treatments affect disease progression. If time is illusory, then health and disease states exist simultaneously, rather than developing through temporal processes. A person experiencing cancer treatment exists simultaneously with their healthy state and their potential recovery or deterioration. Medical intervention might serve to help consciousness access healthier aspects of their eternal existence rather than causing temporal changes in physical condition. The agricultural industry, feeding 7.9 billion people through the cultivation of over 5 billion hectares of farmland, operates on seasonal cycles that assume temporal progression from planting to harvest. Global food production of over 4 billion tons annually depends on understanding weather patterns, soil conditions, and plant growth cycles that unfold through time. If time is illusory, then all stages of plant development exist simultaneously, with farming practices helping to access the aspects of eternal reality where crops provide nourishment. Urban planning, affecting over 4.4 billion people living in cities worldwide, assumes temporal development from current conditions to future infrastructure needs. Megacities like Tokyo, with 37.4 million residents, require transportation systems, utilities, and housing based on projections of future growth and changing needs. If time is illusory, then all stages of urban development exist simultaneously, with city planning serving to access optimal configurations of eternal urban reality. The implications for space exploration become particularly fascinating. NASA's annual budget of approximately $25 billion funds missions based on the assumption that spacecraft launched today will reach distant destinations in the future. The Voyager 1 spacecraft, launched in 1977, has travelled over 23 billion kilometres from Earth and continues transmitting data after 46 years of travel time. If time is illusory, then Voyager 1 exists simultaneously at its launch, throughout its journey, and at its eventual silence in the depths of interstellar space. The James Webb Space Telescope, positioned at the L2 Lagrange point 1.5 million kilometres from Earth, observes galaxies whose light has travelled for over 13 billion years. These observations reveal the universe as it existed when it was only several hundred million years old. But if time is illusory, then these ancient galaxies exist simultaneously with their current evolved states, with telescopic observations serving to access different aspects of eternal cosmic reality, rather than viewing the actual past. Current efforts to detect extraterrestrial intelligence, including the SETI Institute's monitoring of radio signals across millions of frequencies, assume that alien civilizations might transmit messages that would travel through time to reach Earth. If time is illusory, then any extraterrestrial intelligences exist simultaneously with their entire communication histories, with SETI serving to access aspects of eternal cosmic conversation rather than receiving temporally transmitted messages. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence has analysed over 100 billion radio signals without detecting confirmed artificial transmissions. The Drake equation estimates the number of communicating civilizations in the Milky Way based on factors including star formation rates, planetary formation probabilities, and civilization longevity. If time is illusory, then all potential civilizations exist simultaneously regardless of when they achieve technological capability, with the apparent absence of signals reflecting the specific aspect of eternal reality accessible to current human consciousness. Conspiracy theories about government knowledge of extraterrestrial contact would require re-examination in a timeless reality. Claims about crashed spacecraft at Roswell in 1947 or secret government programs like Project Blue Book assume temporal sequences of events and cover-ups. If time is illusory, then any actual extraterrestrial contact exists simultaneously, with its discovery and its concealment, with conspiracy theories potentially reflecting attempts to access different aspects of eternal truth about humanity's relationship with other intelligences. The recent release of Pentagon videos showing unidentified aerial phenomena has generated renewed speculation about non-human technology. These objects demonstrate flight characteristics that appear to violate known physics, including instantaneous acceleration and direction changes that would generate forces exceeding 400 times Earth's gravity. If time is illusory, then these phenomena might represent intrusions of other aspects of eternal reality into human temporal experience, rather than visits from extraterrestrial civilizations. Military spending worldwide exceeds $2 trillion annually, much of it based on temporal assumptions about future threats and the need for technological advancement over time. Defense systems like the Aegis combat system can track over 100 targets simultaneously and guide missiles to intercept threats traveling at speeds exceeding Mach 5. If time is illusory, then all military conflicts exist simultaneously, with defense preparations serving to access aspects of eternal reality where societies remain secure rather than preventing future attacks. Nuclear weapons arsenals containing approximately 13,000 warheads worldwide, with explosive yields totaling over 40,000 megatons, exist based on temporal deterrence theories. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction assumes that the threat of future retaliation prevents present aggression. If time is illusory, then nuclear warfare and nuclear peace exist simultaneously, with current arsenals reflecting humanity's access to both destructive and peaceful aspects of eternal reality. The environmental movement involving millions of activists worldwide operates on the assumption that present actions can prevent future ecological collapse. Climate models project temperature increases, sea level rise, and species extinction based on temporal causation between current emissions and future consequences. Global carbon emissions of approximately 37 billion tons annually accumulate in atmospheric concentrations that persist for centuries. If time is illusory, then pristine natural environments exist simultaneously, with polluted conditions and potential restoration. The Amazon rainforest, covering 5.5 million square kilometers and containing over 10% of known species, exists simultaneously in its pre-human state, its current deforested condition, and its potential future recovery or destruction. Environmental activism might serve to help human consciousness access the aspects of eternal reality where ecosystems flourish, rather than causing temporal improvements. The concept of progress itself becomes suspect in a timeless reality. Technological advancement, from the development of agriculture 10,000 years ago to current artificial intelligence systems processing exabytes of data annually, assumes temporal improvement and innovation. Patent systems worldwide, protecting millions of inventions, operate on the assumption that new technologies represent temporal advances over previous capabilities. If time is illusory, then all technological possibilities exist simultaneously. The first stone tools exist alongside quantum computers, with human civilization accessing different aspects of eternal technological potential, rather than developing capabilities through temporal progression. Innovation might represent the discovery of eternally existing solutions, rather than the creation of new technologies. Educational curricula worldwide, teaching over 1.5 billion students, organize knowledge based on temporal assumptions about prerequisite learning and skill development. Mathematics education progresses from basic arithmetic to advanced calculus, based on the assumption that earlier concepts must be learned before later ones. If time is illusory, then students simultaneously possess all mathematical understanding, with education serving to help consciousness access different aspects of eternal knowledge, rather than acquiring new information sequentially. Language evolution, affecting over 7,000 languages spoken by 7.9 billion people, assumes temporal development from simpler to more complex communication systems. Linguistic analysis suggests that all human languages derive from common ancestral tongues spoken by early human populations. If time is illusory, then all possible languages exist simultaneously, with current linguistic diversity representing different aspects of eternal human communicative potential rather than historical development. The implications for consciousness studies become particularly profound. Neuroscientists estimate that the human brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons, forming over 100 trillion synaptic connections. Each neuron can fire up to 1,000 times per second, creating patterns of electrical activity that somehow give rise to subjective experience. Current theories of consciousness, including global workspace theory and integrated information theory, attempt to explain how neural activity creates awareness. If time is illusory, then consciousness might not emerge from temporal neural processes, but might instead be fundamental to reality itself. The hard problem of consciousness, explaining how subjective experience arises from objective neural activity, might reflect the fact that consciousness exists eternally and uses neural systems to sample different aspects of timeless reality. Individual human consciousness might represent localized access to eternal awareness rather than temporary emergent phenomena. This perspective transforms our understanding of death and personal identity. Currently, over 60 million people die annually worldwide, with their deaths representing the apparent termination of individual consciousness. If time is illusory, then consciousness associated with each person exists eternally, with physical death representing only the boundary of their temporal appearance rather than actual cessation. Birth and death rates vary dramatically worldwide, with some countries experiencing population growth while others face demographic decline. Japan's population of 125 million is projected to decrease to 88 million by 2065 due to low birth rates and aging demographics. If time is illusory, then all population levels exist simultaneously, with current demographics representing one aspect of eternal human existence rather than temporal changes in numbers. Personal memory and identity formation would require re-examination. Human memory systems involving complex interactions between the hippocampus, prefrontal cortex, and other brain regions create the impression of continuous personal identity through temporal experience. Autobiographical memories, episodic memories of specific life events, and semantic memories of general knowledge combine to create the sense of being the same person who existed in the past and will continue into the future. If time is illusory, then all versions of each person exist simultaneously. The child you were, the adult you are, and the elderly person you will become exist eternally without temporal sequence. Personal growth and development might represent consciousness accessing different aspects of your eternal existence rather than changes through time. The memories that create your sense of continuous identity might be ways of connecting with other temporal aspects of your eternal self. Psychological healing and therapy, practiced by millions of mental health professionals worldwide, operate on temporal assumptions about recovery and positive change over time. Cognitive behavioral therapy assumes that changing current thought patterns can improve future emotional states. Trauma therapy helps patients process past events that continue to affect present functioning. global mental health spending exceeds $100 billion annually based on the assumption that therapeutic interventions can create temporal improvements. If time is illusory, then psychological health and dysfunction exist simultaneously rather than developing through temporal processes. Therapy might serve to help consciousness access healthier aspects of eternal existence rather than causing temporal changes in mental state. Traumatic events and healing from trauma might coexist eternally, with therapy facilitating access to the healing aspects rather than creating recovery through time. The criminal justice system, operating in countries worldwide with combined prison populations exceeding 11 million people, assumes temporal causation between crimes and consequences. Legal proceedings determine guilt for past actions and impose future punishments based on temporal theories of deterrence and rehabilitation. Annual global spending on criminal justice exceeds $500 billion based on assumptions about temporal relationships between law enforcement and crime prevention. If time is illusory, then criminal acts and their consequences exist simultaneously rather than following temporal sequences. The person who commits a crime exists eternally alongside the person who experiences punishment and potential rehabilitation. Justice might serve to help consciousness access aspects of eternal reality where harmony prevails rather than creating temporal improvements through punishment. Social relationships and human connection would take on new dimensions in a timeless reality. The approximately 8 billion people currently alive maintain countless relationships through families, friendships, professional associations, and romantic partnerships. These relationships appear to develop, mature, and sometimes end through temporal processes involving shared experiences, communication, and mutual influence. If time is illusory, then all aspects of every relationship exist simultaneously. First meetings exist alongside final farewells, with every moment of connection, conflict, love, and loss occurring eternally. Relationship dynamics might represent different ways of experiencing eternal connections rather than temporal developments between individuals. Marriage ceremonies, performed approximately 50 million times annually worldwide, might celebrate the recognition of eternal union rather than creating temporal commitments. Parenthood and child development would require complete reconceptualization. Currently, over 2 billion children under 18 years of age develop through predictable stages from infancy to adulthood. Child development psychology documents consistent patterns of cognitive, emotional, and social growth that occur across cultures. Educational systems and parenting practices worldwide are based on understanding these temporal developmental processes. If time is illusory, then every child exists simultaneously at all stages of development. The infant, toddler, child, adolescent, and adult versions of each person coexist eternally. Parenting might serve to help consciousness access the aspects of eternal childhood, where growth and learning flourish rather than causing temporal development. The parent-child relationship would exist in its entirety, from first pregnancy through eventual role reversals in old age. Economic systems worldwide, managing approximately $95 trillion in global GDP annually, operate entirely on temporal assumptions. Investment assumes that present capital allocation can generate future returns. Debt represents present consumption against future repayment. Insurance protects against future risks based on historical probability calculations. Stock markets in major cities trade on expectations about future corporate performance. If time is illusory, then all economic states exist simultaneously. Poverty and wealth, recession and prosperity, scarcity and abundance coexist eternally, rather than alternating through temporal cycles. Economic activity might serve to help consciousness access different aspects of eternal abundance, rather than creating temporal improvements in material conditions. The global economy's apparent growth, complexity, and occasional crises might represent various ways of experiencing eternal economic relationships. Currency systems, including approximately 180 official national currencies, plus thousands of cryptocurrencies, assume temporal value stability or predictable change over time. Foreign exchange markets trade over $6.6 trillion daily, based on expectations about future currency valuations relative to economic and political developments. If time is illusory, then all currency values exist simultaneously, with market fluctuations representing different ways of accessing eternal value relationships rather than temporal changes in worth. Corporate structures and business operations worldwide employ over 3.3 billion people in organizations designed for temporal efficiency and growth. Strategic planning assumes that present decisions influence future outcomes. Research and development spending exceeds $2 trillion annually, based on expectations that current investments will generate future innovations and competitive advantages. If time is illusory, then all business states exist simultaneously. Startup companies exist alongside their mature forms and eventual dissolution or transformation. Every employee exists eternally in all roles they ever occupy. Corporate success and failure coexist as different aspects of eternal organizational reality, rather than temporal outcomes of strategic decisions. The entertainment industry creates content consumed by billions of people worldwide based entirely on temporal narrative structures. Movies, television shows, books, video games, and other media tell stories that unfold through time, with characters experiencing development and events following causal sequences. Global entertainment spending exceeds $2 trillion annually for content that assumes temporal progression and audience engagement with unfolding narratives. If time is illusory, then all stories exist in their entirety simultaneously, rather than unfolding through temporal experience. Characters exist eternally in all their states rather than developing through narrative arcs. Audience engagement with entertainment might serve to access different aspects of eternal dramatic reality, rather than experiencing temporal story development. The emotional impact of narratives might reflect recognition of eternal patterns rather than investment in temporal outcomes. Sports and competitive activities worldwide engage billions of participants and spectators in activities based entirely on temporal assumptions. Athletic performance assumes that training over time improves capabilities. Competition determines winners and losers through temporal contests. Records represent improvements over historical achievements. The global sports industry generates over $700 billion annually, celebrating temporal human achievement. If time is illusory, then all athletic performances exist simultaneously. Every race has already been run, every game already played, every record already set and broken. Athletes exist eternally in all their performance states rather than improving through temporal training. Sports might serve to celebrate different aspects of eternal human physical capability rather than creating temporal achievements. The Olympics, featuring over 11,000 athletes from over 200 nations every 4 years, would represent a sampling of eternal athletic achievement rather than temporal competition. Current world records in track and field, swimming, weightlifting, and other sports would coexist with all future improvements and historical performances. The emotional drama of competition might reflect recognition of eternal athletic relationships rather than temporal uncertainty about outcomes. Professional sports leagues worldwide, including associations football with over 4 billion fans, American football with hundreds of millions of viewers, basketball, baseball, hockey, and countless other sports, create seasonal narratives of competition leading to championship outcomes. These leagues generate over $150 billion annually through ticket sales, broadcasting rights, merchandise, and sponsorships based on audience investment in temporal competitive narratives. If time is illusory, then every season exists simultaneously with its outcomes already determined eternally. Team championships exist alongside defeats, with franchises simultaneously experiencing all possible competitive results. Player careers exist in their entirety rather than developing through temporal performance changes. Fan loyalty and emotional investment might represent recognition of eternal team relationships rather than support through temporal competitive cycles. As we reach the conclusion of this exploration, the implications of time being an illusion extend far beyond academic physics into every aspect of human experience. If leading physicists like Einstein, Hawking, and Ravelli are correct that time represents a persistent illusion created by consciousness rather than a fundamental feature of reality, then everything we believe about existence requires fundamental reconsideration. The 7.9 billion people currently alive would exist simultaneously, with all humans throughout history in an eternal present, where birth and death represent boundaries rather than temporal events. The universe itself, from the Big Bang through the current epoch to eventual heat death, would exist as a static four-dimensional structure rather than an evolving temporal process. Consciousness might serve as a searchlight, illuminating different aspects of eternal reality rather than experiencing genuine temporal flow. Perhaps most profound would be the realization that every moment of beauty, love, discovery, and wonder exists eternally alongside every experience of suffering, loss, and despair. The morning coffee that began this exploration exists permanently in the block universe, steam rising forever in an eternal present where all possibilities coexist. In such a reality, the search for meaning might shift from creating temporal progress to recognizing and accessing the eternal patterns that give existence its deepest significance. Whether time proves to be fundamental or illusory, exploring this question reveals the remarkable mystery of existence itself and our profound fortune to experience consciousness capable of contemplating such cosmic questions. In either case, we remain part of something far more magnificent and strange than our everyday experience suggests.